I don't know what it's like not to be one of 17. It's like that's how it is. My parents taught me the importance of values in your life and making sure that you do the right thing.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
Hi, I'm David Wells and I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Biomedical Science, and we represent scientists who work in medical laboratories across the UK, and we have 21,000 members, and this is my Duvet flip.
What does it mean to do a good job? Really do a good job?
Putting your head above the parapet and giving it extra, really important, and that's the secret of success, I think. Go and have that experience, go and serve people.
How do you convince people to get on board?
Vision is the most important thing. Being able to articulate very clearly about what you want. If you've got this vision, there's someone else out there who will also share that vision. I had an email from number 10 inviting me to a meeting to talk about the pandemic, and I sat there thinking, I'm sitting here listening about Freddy Fingers and how to read, but I've got this massive challenge.
Did Freddy the Fingers give you any help?
No, at all.
But what's your duvet flip? What gets you out of bed in the morning to flip the duvet? So welcome to my duvet flip. How are we?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad. You've got a nice coffee. I've got my English breakfast tea. What more can you ask for, right?
Nothing else, Jack.
We've got it all, right? We've got it all. I'm so fascinated about your career because it's so interesting in terms of the different things that you currently do, where you've come from, and everything in between. I want to start at the beginning. Tell me a bit about your childhood. Was it 14, how many siblings?
17.
17?
Well, I'm one of 17.
One of 17 siblings.
An interesting fact about me is I'm one of 17 children. My parents had 6 of their own and adopted 11 others from across the world. And this taught me the importance of giving back.
Tell me a bit about that experience.
That was my normal life. So I don't know what it's like not to be one of 17. It's like that's how it is. So, but it was really good. I think from my perspective, what my parents taught me in terms of looking to give back to the to society in any way they could, really taught me the importance of actually making sure you've got values in your life and making sure that you do the right thing in your life. Because I think one of the things someone said to me once, one little change can really change someone else's life. And so actually we have a duty to give back.
Absolutely. You've opened a few things for me there, which I would love to dig into. Firstly, I totally agree around giving back to the community, and one thing can change someone's life. I always say you're one connection away from a better life or one connection away from not a better life. And so choose your circle very carefully. But I want to talk a little bit about values, because values get put around everywhere. What's your values? Or look at the values on the wall. How does one individual, when they're going into a professional setting or starting out, really define what their values are? And how did you do it? And what's your advice to others trying to find their key values?
Yeah, so I think for me, your values are what gets you up in the morning. It's my duvet flip. It's what gets you up in the morning, and it's actually what makes you and what drives you. So is it a thirst for knowledge? Is it a thirst to do a good job? Is it a thirst for money, for example? Those things are really important, and you need to understand that if that's your motivator, that's what you need to do, and you need to pick the thing that really motivates you. And for me, my value was always about what impact can we have in our day-to-day lives on a larger community, no matter how small or whatever. And so for me, it was very much, what do I do that gets me up in the morning, that gets me to the point where saying, actually, I value the job that I do for me, not it's valued by other people, but valued by me. So for me, the value for me is the bit that actually gives back. So when I go and do a job, and I do a good job, I get the kudos myself. I'm the one who rewards myself. And if I do a bad job, I'm the one who's the hardest critic about that. And I think for me, that's what you've got to do. You've got to have something which you're so passionate about that you can beat yourself up about, but also celebrate yourself in terms of what you're doing. And that for me is the critical part of any value. Personally, I would say, look, actually, if you're doing something for something which doesn't motivate you, then really, really question it. Because actually what drives you fundamentally is the bit that will make you succeed in your life.
I love that. So listen to your own internal They say the gut feeling,
Yeah.
don't they? Listen to your gut feeling, look at what your drivers are, what motivates you, and head down that road to build your values. If you come unstuck a little bit and there's something that's not really motivating you, stop and ask yourself the question, is this really for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all met people in our careers where that's not true, and you can see it. You can see it in their work. You can see it in the way they are, and you think, well, actually, go and do the thing that really drives you. And for me, science was always my passion. Right from very early on, I would sit and watch David Attenborough programs, and really would always want to explore and understand how the world works. It's something which I still do today. And for me, that's the value. That understanding how it works better, understanding what difference it can make, and those sort of things, and then patch that together with my desire to work within health, particularly. To help other people, to know that whatever I do, whatever energy I put in, was benefiting someone somewhere in that part. And I think that for me is it. Do the things that really drive you. But let's hope we've got social conscience in it too.
We're going to talk about science and health in a bit, but what happened when what was your first job, your paying job? What was that doing? And if you was going back to your younger self now, what would you be telling yourself in terms of the learnings that you've learned along the way?
So my first job was, like a lot of people, I did a paper round and I worked in a shop on the Saturdays. And you know what would I say to myself? I would say to myself, don't change anything. Go and have that experience. Go and serve people. Go and do a job where you work hard for for someone else or whatever, and learn the skills about dealing with people, different range of people, the people you work with, your colleagues, members of the public, etc. So I don't think I'll change anything about my advice other than stick at it. And do a good job. I mean, for me personally, doing a good job is really important, and putting your head above the parapet and giving that extra, really important. And that's the secret of success, I think. So I think, I don't think I would change my advice or who I was by going back and saying anything to myself, but that's it. Keep on doing it. Do that bit extra. Go the extra mile. Make sure you're doing a good job.
And I love the extra mile because that's how you stand out, and actually that's your growth moment, right? It's the extra
Absolutely.
bits that push you. What does it mean to actually do a good job? Like, when I was growing up, and I grew up in a council estate, I did a paper round as well, and that learnt me a lot about people and how people like their papers folded, and every bit in between. You learn the little things, and people around me used to say, Jack, it doesn't matter what you do in life as long as you do a good job. But can you help break that down? Like, what does, like, a number of people listening in, what does it mean to do a good job, really do a good job? So
I think doing a good job is about the energy you put into it. So whether it's success or failure. Yeah, and every failure is a part of what you're doing in your job. But actually putting your all into it, not shirking it, making sure that actually you attend to every element of that job, not slapdash, those sort of things. That's doing a good job. And again, it goes back to what I said before. If you're proud of the job you've done personally, you've done a good job. If you're not proud of the job you've done personally, okay, you've got some questions to ask yourself. Now, quickly, your boss, your employer, might say, well, yeah, that was good enough, or whatever. But actually, if you felt like you've done a good job, then that's it. So for me, doing a good job is about, did you put the energy in? Did you do everything you could do? Did you go the extra mile to make sure it was done properly?
And how important was money for you early on? And what education did you have around money? Because young people don't even know how to read their pay slips, and the financial well-being advice across the country is at an all-time low, along with a lot of other things. For you, was money a motivator, or was it the science, or did it just all just come together? So
I'm not money motivated whatsoever. Biggest switch off for me, actually, and for me it's the job. And so, my family was 1 of 17, so did we have lots of money? No, we didn't have lots of money growing up. Did I do jobs that earned me loads of money? No, my motivation was science and being interested in the jobs that I was doing. And over time, clearly, as you've got promotions and those sort of things, yes, the money comes. And so, at times of my life, struggled with money and in terms of income, but now I'm in a position where actually, I'm okay. But I don't do the job for the money. I do it purely for the passion of biomedical science.
I love that. And your advice to anyone who's struggling with money right now, because you've experienced it, and you a bit like me. I want to support youth and get young people motivated into jobs and inspired around their lives. I do it because I want to leave a legacy.
Yeah.
For me, this is all about how can we help the next generation. I know the older generation needs help as well with the pension gap and everything. Obviously, one step at a time, right? But like, there's loads of people out there struggling and with money. And for anyone who's listening, we have to do this. For anyone listening, there is a disclaimer. Take your own money advice. This is just an opinion. And we're not that we've gone through our own money challenges. But what is your money advice to people?
So I think really is about accept the fact. So if you're a student at university and you're struggling with money, then it's not the end of the world to take an additional job. It is okay to work, to do that thing. But equally, it's about actually, well, what else can you do? So actually, can you push in for the overtime? Can you find an extra a bit of work that helps you? Because unfortunately, money is the reality of the world, isn't it? The other thing is always be very careful around debt. I think that's the one life lesson for me. Definitely is like, going to university is expensive, and you'll get yourself into some debt. But make sure you clear that debt when you can. Yes, it's great to live life. It is great to live life, but actually that's the basis. So that actually life is much easier if you're careful with your money, and that does mean sacrifices, doesn't it? That doesn't mean we're not living our lives, and not the whole world is not an Instagram life. That's a fallacy. The whole world is actually
everything's
reality.
Not filtered, right?
Yeah, everything's not filtered. And so I think that for me is the important part. But equally, if you're doing the things you are passionate about, genuinely passionate about, and I for me this is very true. I get up in the morning and go and do a job I love, and I have done for a number of decades, which makes me very, very lucky. I get it. But that means the money bit's not as important, and nor are the other bits and pieces. For me personally, do I need to go and have lots of expensive hobbies? No, you know what? I get up and do my job. I love my job. That's as much my hobby as it is anything else. And again, that's a bit about the worldview, isn't it? So if your job is your passion, then actually other bits will fit in, and you won't need those expensive hobbies or other things that complete your life, because your life is I wouldn't say largely complete, because of course it's much more than just work, but it's a really important part of your work.
You spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, more time than you're asleep. You're at work, and the rest of the time you're cooking and cleaning and doing all the domestic stuff. So it really is important. So that really, really helps. So a job you love, a realistic expectation of, okay, so what else can I do to support myself, and making sure that you manage your money well is the only advice, because it's very hard to manage money when you're in debt. Very hard. It's a hard slog to get out of it.
I think that's so practical and sensible advice. If you are at uni or you are struggling, look at an additional job. Keep your eyes on the debt. Make sure that it's not overflowing, because that could create all sorts of stress, anxiety, and everything in between, right? And find something that you love. You and I are sitting here saying find something you love. You're doing what you love. I'm doing what I love. I people say, Jack, you need to have a day off or pause, and I'm like, I can't, because I don't see it as work. I love this, what I do, and there's so much to do it, and you can't do it alone, and you need lots of people to help you. But I really passionately love what I do, so sometimes the personal and most times they blend. Like you said, when you stop to cook and clean, that's when it doesn't. What are the principles of someone finding a job that they love? Because once you get there, every morning's easier, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And let's be honest, not everyone's lucky enough to land a job they love. And so I think, kudos to people who work hard, because that's what they have to do. But the secret really is finding your niche. So I always say within my career, so I started off as a scientist, and I love science. But you know what? I think I'm a better manager than I am scientist. And I found that's the bit that was my niche. That was the bit that I excelled at, being organised, leading people, getting people to change the way they work. That for me was I'm a scientist, still do it, but when was the last time I touched a test tube? It was about 2013. So, a long time ago. And I think that's the bit, it's whatever job you're doing, or every employer you're working with, find your niche within that. What bit really sparked your interest? And it could be something you didn't know. It could be something which was absolutely blindsided you in terms of, actually, that's not my interest, but I like it. And push for that. So I think there are ways in it. I think that's the secret. Is find your niche in that.
So do something, find your niche in what you're doing. And for you, it was, you found out you was good at organising, managing, and then you went down that route. How did that come about? Was that just putting your hand up, asking for an opportunity? Or how did that come to play for you to go from being a scientist to being a scientist with management skills and then leading an organisation? How did that kind of transition happen? Did someone come and hug you and go, I will help you become a manager? Did you have mentors around you? Did you put your hand, what was your journey to get to A to B?
Yeah, so I've been lucky in my career. I've been supported by some really fantastic people, and I couldn't have got to here without those fantastic people. I think in my first moment where I thought, okay, this is a job for me, is when I was looking to a master's degree, and I was doing this while I was working in a shop. Actually, I thought I need to progress in my science career. I was looking to a master's degree, and then I landed the job working in a lab in a hospital. And I nervously went to my boss and said, look, I want to do a master's degree, thinking he might be a bit cross. How dare you? How dare you do a master's degree while working here, sort of thing. He just turned around and said to me, are you a trainee? And I thought, no. And he said, right, we are now, and we'll pay for your masters.
Wow.
And that, for me, was a massive step. That was they were paying for my masters, and I'd been converted from a medical laboratory assistant into a trainee biomedical scientist. And then, for me, it was a natural progression, because once I moved into becoming a biomedical scientist and running the lab from a new biomedical science perspective, you're working 24/7. You're working on your own at times. You work out how to organise things, and I realised actually I was quite good at that part. And obviously other people saw that, and that's when I got promoted to a senior biomedical scientist, and then on to what we call a chief biomedical scientist, who's in charge of a large section of a lab. And I found that I could do it. That for me, it was easy. Getting people to do all the functions in the laboratory, to organise them, get everyone in the right place, and make sure the workload's going through. Like I said, the labs are open 24/7, 7 days a week. There, everything from results that need to be available because someone's having a heart attack in A&E within an hour, to all the GP work that comes in, which may be many thousands of samples every day. How do you organise that? Keep that all running, keep that show on the road. All the chemicals coming in and equipment service and all those sort of things. And I was just quite good at that part. And for me, again, going back to my point about the niche part, that's where I pushed myself into that sort of managing that part. And did everyone stop and say to me, "You're a better manager, you are a scientist"? No, that's my reflections. But clearly, people saw that I was, and they didn't encourage me to become this high-end scientist in a very discrete discipline of science. But they said, "Go and do this bit and build things up." And then when I got to my parts of my career where I was head of pathology within NHS England, reorganising the whole country's pathology services from 120 or so separate laboratories into 29 networks. That takes a lot of managing and leadership. Lots and lots of moving parts, lots of people who you're not directly in charge of, and you've got to encourage them to get on board and see the vision and all those sort of things. And I think if I go back to the question that how do you know you're a good manager, was I've fortunately always been able to share a vision with people, and then left them to get on and work out how they deliver that part of the vision. Now, be that on just organising a small section within a laboratory, we want to get through this work, I'll leave it to you guys to work out how you do it, right the way through to we need to reorganise all the deck chairs. How are we going to do it? And I think that's the bit for me, I think.
So, find your niche, be brave enough to stand up and ask the question and say, I want to do a master's, and then look for your superpower, which you're on selling a vision, right?
Yep.
And bringing other people on. How do you, for instance, that project in getting the the lab, all those groups together to turn it into, was it 29, did you say?
That's right, yeah.
Like, how did you not let that get you overwhelmed? And, you know, or imposter syndrome, it's easy to sit in front of you, get a list of things that you need to do, and go, and then how do you embrace yourself? And where a lot of people focus on the deadline, not the start line. And I'm a big believer, if you just want something done, just start the next step. And yes, have a plan, but just start the next step. But a lot of people find it really difficult to start the first ever step. Yeah. For you, what's your advice to, whether it's someone else wanting to reorganise the deck chairs in the lab, or whether it's someone who's looking for their first job or trying to get their debt down?
Yeah.
What is your advice?
So I mean, I suppose your question is, where do you start when you've got like a project that's so big? And the answer is you've said it. Be clear about what your end point is. Just be clear about that bit, and then build it piecemeal. So
piece it down.
Yeah, and get it to the point where, okay, so what's the next step? Let's get to the next gateway, and then let's see where we are after that. And then after that, okay, well, what's the next gateway after that one? Okay, let's move on to the next step. And I think if you're going from the point of reorganising the country's pathology services, you've got to be. I should use this phrase, the politician, because you've got to sell the vision to people, and that's true. It's a good thing and a bad thing, I think. But also, you've got to convince people. People aren't stupid. They're not going to sit there and say, "Oh, yes, David says so, so we'll go and do it." You've got to convince them, and you've got to be prepared to stand up and say, "Okay, I'm going to say this." So when you're going through that first gateway, it's about being brave, that next step, and then saying, "Hey, what's our next big gateway?" And then the next step. And you asked a bit about imposter syndrome. God, we all have imposter syndrome. That's normal. And you know what? That keeps you, I think, sharp on, okay, have I got my argument right? So if I'm going to go to my boss and ask for to lead on this project or whatever, have I got my argument right? Have I got all the questions they might ask me? Imposter syndrome helps you shape that. Okay, so what am I going to ask? Who's going to ask me? What other questions could they? What are the curveballs that might be thrown at me? Have I got all of those covered? So it really does. So I don't think imposter syndrome is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because it helps people really be sharp. But have the confidence that it is just imposter syndrome.
I hear you, and I'm just thinking, imposter syndrome can be your accountability partner. Yeah. Like, because when you get it, you're like, oh, what about they asked me this? Okay. And it starts building that accountability, right? Yeah,
definitely. And when you're standing up in front of several hundred people trying to convince them to undertake a change in the way they work that's been unchanged for many, many decades, you've got to have all your arguments sorted. You've got to have not just the vision, but okay, what's the counter argument? What might they come back with? Why? Yeah, what's my answer? And is it solid? Is it a solid answer? And I always say, if I can convince my biggest skeptic about something, that I'm right. An interesting fact about the Institute of Biomedical Science is that we support every single biomedical scientist working in the UK and across the globe. And we support the training of an additional 1,200 new biomedical scientists every single year.
I can see you're someone who can take a vision, get people on board, and make it happen. And those three things are rare. Normally people have a vision, they talk a lot of stuff, they can't get people on board, and they definitely don't make it happen. But it seems that across all three, you make that happen. How can young people, or anyone looking in today, how can they make their vision happen in a practical way? Like, what are the steps? How do you convince people to get on board? How do you be the politician when you need to be, and be conservative where you need to be? When do you know when to step in and step away and let the team get on with it?
Yeah, so I think for me, vision is the biggest hurdle. Being able to articulate very clearly about what you want. I think that's probably the most important thing. The second thing is getting other people to understand the vision is also really, really important, because you know what? If you've got this vision, there's someone else out there who will also share that vision, or someone else will be really passionate in helping you achieve that vision. And we've all got examples in our lives where people have really wanted to help other people, or we've had mentors and teachers and whatever who really support us. So that's the first thing, is really being able to describe what your vision is. The next thing is, it's hard work. And it's at times when you're putting your head above the precipice, and I mean that, because actually you've got to be able to stand up and say, okay, we can do this. I think back to my time running the testing for COVID for NHS England, and I was drafted into the team to provide the subject matter expertise and lead the team in delivering the capability. Yeah, and the first question is, do you think we can do it? Now, the vision's clear. We need to have enough COVID tests to support the NHS, no matter how many cases of COVID we get. And it's going to be really important for everyone in the country that we do this. And the vision is very much as many tests as we can do.
And how many tests was happening at the time?
So when we went into the pandemic, the NHS could do about 200 tests a day for COVID. Bear in mind they'd created that test from scratch, in weeks before, and our targets, although they kept going up thanks to Matt Hancock, was around about 100,000 tests a day would support the NHS. And there was another element which was the public testing, but the bits that I was doing was the supporting the NHS.
So you had to get it from 200 to 100,000 a day.
Yeah.
So there's the vision's the 100,000, and currently what was happening was the capability was 200.
Yeah. Now, and the next thing, of course, is getting other people on board. Now, this is where my work on the 29 pathology networks came to, because I could ring up 29 people and say, we've got this ask. I know you can do it. And again, that's the wonderful thing about my profession. I didn't doubt for a second it couldn't achieve it. But can you make your labs do as many as possible? And you set those targets on a sensible basis. So when you're delivering your vision, what are the next steps? What are each step in turn that gets you to where you want to do? And I think one thing we also touched on earlier on, which was setting a vision isn't doing the do. If you trust people and they want to help you realise your vision, you've got to be hands off and let them exhibit their areas of expertise. So my piece was not to sit there and say, here's what I want and here's how you can do it. It was, here's what I want. You tell me what you need to do it in the way you can do it. And that flexibility and that capability meant the country could respond to that. And we had huge issues with supply chains, with people, enough people in the laboratories in terms of workforce. At the time we had people going off sick with COVID, as you'd expect. We had massive issues in terms of how much pressure was being put on the NHS. So actually it wouldn't have been helpful to tell people how to do things. What was helpful was, what have you got now? What additional resource do you need? And how to make it happen? And then having very supportive conversations. So actually sitting I think we're up to about 3 or 4 conversations every day sometimes with the whole country. Luckily teams came to its fore in that. And you're sitting there saying, okay, this is still the vision. The vision doesn't change. And that's another important thing. Don't let your vision creep, because you'll lose people. The vision was enough testing for the NHS, and we didn't shift off that. How to was the next part, and everyone's able to do their bit in the way that they're the expert. So again, that's how you do it. It's not a command and control. It is okay, we can all get on board with this, and then let's work out how we live that at each level, at each stage, each part of the country, or whatever. And like I said, also having confidence and having people's back. So more than once, I was asked, is this even possible, by some very senior people and politicians, and don't waver, because actually the answer is yes, it is possible. But actually it's not helpful if you put doubt into that mix. So actually again,
the confidence is a core piece to keep it going, right?
Absolutely.
So set the vision, find out who needs to do what, give them the space to do it how they need to do it, and throughout the process have confidence with all stakeholders so everyone feels confident. Because as soon as there's one wobble,
the whole lot can come down. Is the answer, because giving people that confidence that we can do this is the first thing, but giving other people the confidence that they've got this in hand. the other part, isn't it? And so the focus then is kept off people, so they get on with the bit we mentioned before, which is doing the job.
And at any time, did you have a wobble? You know, as leaders, you're a CEO, I'm a CEO. Sometimes you set the vision and you go in and you know how it's going to be, but as part of it you go, oh, I didn't expect that bit to prop up. We didn't obviously predict that. And in that moment you have two choices. Just say, bloody hell, this is not going to work. Or you smile, you act, and you go, we're going to make this happen and we're going to find a way together. Knowing that you don't know a way right now, and you walk out that room and you go, bloody hell. But you find a way. Was there any times across your career, not just with the pandemic, but just anything that sometimes you had to put your leadership hat on and your act? I always say CEOs are professional actors. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm one.
Probably true.
Yeah, and we have to act to motivate and inspire people, right?
So the answer is, did I doubt any part of my career, the reconfiguration of all the pathology laboratories, meeting the challenge that COVID presented us? Did I doubt it personally? Yeah, more than once I sat on a train and think to myself, God, this is big. This is really going to be difficult. I remember, again, right at the very start of the COVID pandemic, I'd got in to see my daughter's school teacher, and she was telling us how to phonetically read with 4-year-olds. And just before we went to the meeting, I had an email from number 10 inviting me to a meeting to talk about the pandemic. Just like I said, right at the very start. And I sat there thinking, I'm sitting here listening about Freddy Fingers and how to read, but I've got this massive challenge. Yeah, and you're sitting there thinking, what's the answer? What is the answer? And the whole journey in it was, what is the answer? What is the answer? And I got into the office and my team was there, and I was like, right, this is what we're going to do. And it goes back to what we were saying about the gateways. First thing, let's get everyone together, let's have a conversation. And once you've had the conversation, you say, okay, I know what's possible now. I know if we keep this up, we can start to build piecemeal our response to this. So yes, everyone will have the moments of doubt, can I do this? But actually it's about being optimistic, about being pragmatic, and it's about making sure you bring everyone with you, and that does take that sort of confidence. And that is the important part, isn't it? Bringing everyone with you. Did Freddy the Fingers give you any help? None at all.
So let's. I want to talk a little bit about. Well, we've been talking about science throughout this all, but I want to talk a little bit about how does one get into the industry. Like, how would I go from? Like, I have no science background. I don't have no degrees, but if I wanted to really, right now, work in a lab, and I got a passion for it, and that's what I do, what would my path, like, what's my first gate?
Yeah, so the first thing would be that you can pretty much work in a medical laboratory at any level. So do you need formal qualifications in science? The answer is probably not. A-level, you can get into that and go and work in a medical laboratory as an assistant, and it is an interesting job. These are interesting jobs. You get to see interesting things the whole time. So if you're passionate in science but you're not academically gifted, that's possible.
What does an assistant do?
So they'll support the scientists in preparing samples, in potentially maintaining analyzers, in making sure that the workflow is going through. All those sort of things. So they're doing an important job. They're making sure patient samples are getting through the process and out the other side. In terms of as an interesting way, there are people who spend their entire lives doing that and have a worthwhile life in doing that. Also, some of them go on to do other things because they realise other people sponsor them to support them to go and get further education. Sponsor them into interesting other areas of science. If their aptitude is there. So again, it's one of those things. It's not like a go and get a job as an assistant and that's all I'm going to do. There are plenty of people who move into research assistant roles and all those sort of things.
And those roles are, like you said, are really important.
They're the backbone.
This is kind of like my lab. Yeah, and without this support, none of this will. I don't know how all this works. Do you know what I mean? And the team they set it all up. Like without this, we wouldn't be able to be here on live and everything working. You need those assistants and you need those people because they are actually really important to the foundations of making sure everything can happen. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other roles, of course, are biomedical scientists. Now, you do need a degree to become a biomedical scientist.
What degree do you need?
So you need a degree in biomedical science.
Cool.
In essence, that's the fastest way. But you could have any biology degree as an entry point, but you need to do a bit more work. You need to do a bit more studying to get all the requirements you need. So to become a biomedical scientist, you have to meet certain standards which are set out by the Health and Care Professionals Council, which regulate biomedical scientists to make sure we keep the public safe. And they set out what a scientist needs to know. And so you've got to prove you know those things. So a biomedical science degree is the best, and it's biomedical science, not biomedical sciences, is the best one. And those often are linked to medical laboratories as well, so you actually start to get the lab experience you need as well. An interesting fact about biomedical science is that they process over 1.1 billion tests every single year, and that's in England alone. And they support the healthcare of over 80% of all users of the NHS.
Just break it down for me. Biomedical science, what is it? What does the role mean? And what is a biomedical lab? Like what happens? What happens? Why are they different to other labs? And you just like really own into what that role is.
So a biomedical scientist, I think probably one of the best professions within medicine. So you cover everything. It often says from before birth to after death and everything in between, everything involved in healthcare. And so my background is biochemistry, and I've been involved in paediatrics, I've been involved in maternity care, I've been involved in general health, I've been involved in everything you can imagine in terms of medicine. So if there is something wrong with you, and you have to have a sample taken, be it a blood sample or a urine sample, whatever, a biomedical scientist will look at that. And they might be looking at the chemicals in the blood, to see whether there's an imbalance there. They might be looking at the blood cells themselves to see if there's a problem there, or they might be looking at sections of tissue to look at the cells. They're looking for cancers and those sort of things. They might be looking at infections, so parasites and bacteria and viruses. They could also be looking for things like transplantation. So if you need an organ transplant, what are the markers on the cell that will tell us whether this organ can be accepted by this person or not? So the range and depth is fascinating and amazing at the same time. And I always think that when I was young, I wanted to be a doctor, but who isn't interested in medicine wants to become a doctor? I'm so glad I didn't get into medical school, because I've ended up with a career and a profession that has enabled me to do so much more with a much broader range of understanding of what that does. So a biomedical science, in short, is there to do and support the medic in making the diagnosis by looking at the blood sample, whatever. They're also there to support monitoring. So if you're on a particular drug, you might need to be monitoring, and also whether treatments are successful or not, to make sure you've cleared the disease, you've cleared the infection, etc.
And just when you look at it from the outside, there was that individual that's now in prison that was running around saying that she wanted to be the next Steve Jobs, and she put a deeper voice on, and you can go boom, and then you get your results. Yeah. When you heard that project come to play, as an expert in the industry, what was you thinking? And did you think, that is possible? Is that possible? Or
so the future you never know, because this is where science gets really interesting. This is why you'll probably see I come live on the camera. Is that some of it comes right down to physics. Okay. So the technology being described by the individual you're talking about is only just possible in the terms of physics, because of the way that how big a blood cell is and how much liquid flows. But could we fix that so that could happen? As in that you have one finger prick and have many blood tests taken. The answer is you can already do that. You can't get every blood test done that way, but you can do a whole range of them. And that's the beauty of technology and physics and working in science, is that innovation's there the whole time. So the amount of understanding about how chemicals work in the body, how they work in a blood tube, what you need to do to make sure you can measure that with analyte that might only exist for a few minutes before it's gone again. And so the interest behind there is huge. So yes, there will be innovations that will get us to a point where we can probably sit at home and do blood tests, and that is possible for some people. But it's not possible, it's not large scale possible, but that is a possibility in the future. Or we might say, well, actually, let's keep it all in big laboratories, because we can do more tests and we can do more the tests to a higher standard. The important part from my perspective is that the profession of biomedical science is there to keep patients safe. So every single test they do, they are experts in making sure the test is doing what the test is meant to be doing and answering the diagnostic question that it's meant to answer. And that's one of the biggest risks we have in our profession, and one of the biggest risks I think towards the public is that people can buy online tests and they may not be fit, although they might say they're fit, they may not be fit for answering the diagnostic question being posed. And to give you an example, there's a test for heart attacks. Now, even in our main laboratories, we have these very sensitive tests for heart attacks. Now, if you went and brought the wrong test, it might be called the same one for the heart attack, but if it isn't sensitive enough, the clinician could discharge that person home with having no heart attack. And the consequence of that is they are something like 50% more likely to die of a second heart attack because they have no treatment. So the consequence of that test not being quite good enough has a massive impact on that patient. So that's why we spend a lot of time on quality and on assurance and those things.
How can one make sure that they're picking up a quality test over but one that might not give them the results that they need? Like, what is the answer?
The answer is to trust the biomedical scientist, if I'm honest. Yep. And there are a number of standards. So like I said, having a biomedical scientist involved in the selection of that test is really, really important. There are a number of international standards that set out how well a medical laboratory needs to be run, that make sure that all the checks are being done. So they're there. So it's trusting the established medical laboratories, and there are private sector and public sector laboratories out there. But if they're appropriately accredited, if they've got the appropriate licenses to work as a medical laboratory, for handling patient samples, you can have a high degree of confidence the tests they're using are the right ones. They won't be the cheapest if you're buying them from the private sector, but they'll be the right ones.
So look out for the licenses, the standards, to make sure that you're...
Yeah, and making sure that, like I said, they've got scientists who are HCPC registered, so biomedical scientists. That's the really,
and that'll be at the end of their name.
So they might, if they're private sector, they might have that in their thing, but you can look them up. If you know their name, you can look them up on the HCPC register
and check to see
if they're there.
Wow, that is cool. And that is just because the mission of the youth group is obviously work, money, and health, and we've covered all three today, which is brilliant. Tell me a little bit about the organisation, because you started 9 years ago on the council, and then about 3.5 years ago you became the CEO. Tell me what you was doing on the council, and then how it kind of came about that you then came in to become CEO, which is just incredible.
So the Institute is the professional body for biomedical scientists, and so obviously as a biomedical scientist I want to be involved to do my bit. Was
it one of those big moments, the tick, but your bucket list, and you're like, I want to do that?
Well, it's funny you say that. So to go on council wasn't on my big bucket list. Wasn't really, and it was more by chance. Someone said, David, you ought to get more involved, and so I did. And so one of those people who just so wise about your career. You ought to do that. And so I got involved in council, and and that gave me a view of how the organisation works, how it supports the profession, and how it drives forward. My experience working in NHS England and all those bits really brought me up to being a leader of my profession in terms of my day job when I worked in NHS was to be the professional voice within the NHS, and I realised actually that that's not the be all end all. And then just towards the end of the pandemic, my predecessor announced her retirement from the role after about 10 years as CEO. And this was one of the jobs that was on my bucket list of things I should do before I retire. And it was one of those moments where I sat there thinking, is now the right time? And I thought, you know what it is. So the pandemic was hard work. It was long hours. It was one of those things. And actually I thought to myself, you know what, David, now's the time to do something different. I moved across to being the chief executive, and I probably do the same job now as I did then in terms of needing to be a visible leader, making sure we've got a voice for the profession, making sure that people understand the importance of biomedical scientists within healthcare. Because there is one thing about biomedical science which is true, is not many people know about them. When they have a blood sample taken at the GP, the presumption is that doctor is doing the blood test, or a face that's another doctor is doing that test. It's not. It's been done by a scientist. And we have people who work within as biomedical science who are independently reporting cancer diagnoses from tissue and so on. They work with equivalents to doctors, but no one really knows about that.
Yeah. And when you was talking about the pandemic and the role that the industry played, it sunk my heart a bit, because I wasn't aware with all the work that you and your team and the wider team were doing, and I'm just like, wow.
But do you know what? There's two parts to this, and it's a pro and it's a con. We in the UK lead the world in terms of training and quality of scientists and the quality of our medical laboratories. We absolutely do, and the international standards are based upon standards that we wrote many years ago, but they're based upon those standards. The fact that people don't hear about us is probably our biggest success, because it means we don't make mistakes very often. It means that we run services that are reliable, consistent, and they meet the needs of the NHS on a consistent basis. You often hear about professions when there is a problem.
Oh, you always do. That's what makes headlines, right?
Yeah, it does.
Not good news stories.
And so that's the pro. The pro means that actually we get it right. We train people well, we make sure they're safe to practice, and they do a good job. The con is, who are these people? And because they're not, and medical laboratories often sit in basements, they sit way behind any sort of public areas in hospitals, but there is a lab in every single hospital in the country.
And that is why we were so excited to have you on, because today we're going to show hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of youth, and everyone in between, on who you are. You're not in a basement. You're here in the studio, sharing the story, how to get into the industry, your advice, a bit about the pandemic. I just think this conversation has been so fascinating. We've only got time for 2 more questions. Okay. It's gone so quick, and I could talk to you all day, because I love to learn, especially when I have no bloody idea. I think the imposter, I'm like, yeah, but that's good for me, because I just love to learn. I know there's many out there like that. What is your one, taking the methodology of science and your experience in life, what's one thing that's become a life lesson that you really, really stand by, that you want to pass on to the next generation or anyone who's tuning in? But only you've kind of you know, we talked earlier of the camera about beach balls, and you said, well, we're actually the ones that come in, and I found that funny. But from your viewpoint, because we all see the world differently, what's one life lesson that you'd like to pass on? So
for me, the life lesson is go the extra mile and be brave about your views. So I think that for me is it. So if I hadn't have gone the extra mile, if I hadn't put my hand up for extra projects, if I hadn't taken risks in taking different jobs, I wouldn't be where I am now at all. And all the extra bits I did, all the bits I add on to my experience, have got me here. Nothing else. I've been fortunate, but I have not been. I'm not a naturally gifted. Other people could get here, but the secret is do the extra bits. Build the skill sets, and I think that's it. Do the extra bits and be brave in your opinion. Yeah. Stand bold, right, and then build those values. Call on the right people. Get out of the way when you need to. Absolutely, that's the most important. That's also important. But not being in the way. Don't micromanage. Yeah. And my final question
is, and I think I know this because you've told the story throughout, but what's your duvet flip? What gets you out of bed in the morning to flip the duvet?
Definitely having working in one of the best professions I could ever imagine doing. So being a biomedical scientist is totally my duvet flip.
I can tell that. You know what? It's been brilliant, and you're one of the first. You are the first on the show, and we've had people who make Percy pigs. We've had people who make Maltesers, but having you on has been so fantastic, and I've really enjoyed this. So I just want to say, David, thank you for your energy, your kindness. You're very practical, and I love when people are just straight to the point and practical, because you get to the answer quicker, and then you just get things done. Yeah. And I can see you're someone who gets things done. So thank you for coming on, sharing your career journey, your career advice about the industry, how we can encourage more others to get into the industry, and just being a real deal. So thank you.
No, well, thank you, Jack.